Good morning. Hello, and welcome to the interview prep workshop. Today, my name is Jessica Pierce, and I'm thrilled to have you all here. If you did get a text that was a little confusing, we're so sorry about that. So we waited a few extra minutes to get started, and you are in the interview preparation workshop, and we are going to do a dive in today into interviewing. And if you would like to get started by opening up your chat box, go ahead and do that. The chat box is on the bottom of your screen. And I want to make sure that you all check in today. So check in with the QR code that is shown on your screen. If maybe you're on your phone or maybe you can't access the QR code, Wendy or Sharon are going to drop the link to check in. There you go. Wendy just dropped it. The link to check in right in the chat. And so you can just click on that option and check in today. And the check-in allows us to get some data so we can continue providing these through the grant opportunities that we're given, and then also make sure that you're on the list to get the resources that we're going to send out after. So we have a job search checklist. We have some information about interviewing that you're going to get. So thank you so much, Arizona at Work, Pinal County, for sponsoring this programming and offering these workshops through, I'm with Career Connectors, and the Career Connectors team is supporting this. So thank you for being here. I hope you get a lot out of today. And I would like to start by having you all drop a couple things in the chat. So let me know where you're calling from. Let us all know where you're calling from. Let us know what kind of job or industry you're targeting. And then I would like to hear, what is some difficult obstacle you feel like you're coming up against? If it specifically has to do with interviewing, I would love to hear that, because then I can make sure to address it today. And if it's something else, then mention that, and I can try to address it today, or we can try to address it in the Q&A at the end. So let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, the industry or the job that you're kind of looking for, and then something you're struggling with in the job search. And while you're doing that, I'll do a quick introduction. So again, Jessica Pierce, and I'm the founder and CEO of the nonprofit organization Career Connectors. We launched in the middle of the Great Recession back in 2009, after, in my area, thousands of people were getting laid off. And my husband and I had both lost our jobs. I closed a business, and my husband was laid off 3 times in 6 months during the Great Recession. So as we were sitting there going, what in the heck are we going to do to feed our kids? So at the time we had an infant, a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old. What are we going to do to provide for our family? So we had to short sell our home. We were renting, and I just was like, it was on my heart to try to help some people write resumes, because I had been running a staffing firm previously and knew at least how to do that. And so that's how we started, in the middle of the Great Recession, out of a need. And the program has just exploded over the years. We've served over 75,000 people, and I have learned a lot about job search, about workforce and jobs, and how to connect with hiring managers, how to figure out where the jobs are and make those connections. And so I am all about connecting. Today, I'm going to be diving into the interview, and I can tell you the most important part of the interview is the connection piece, because people hire people they know and like. And the connection piece, building that chemistry part, is essential. So we'll walk through how to do that today. And thank you all for answering in the chat. I'm just going to take a look at some of your responses here. All right. CNA, welcome, Anaya. Okay, we have some HR, some home health people. All right, Maricopa, hi, Marlena. Nice to see you. Fort Worth, good morning, you guys. Thank you for answering. Yeah, Eric, I hear you. I hear you. You want to scream. You're like, I know I need to pay my bills, and I know there's something better out there, and you are right, there is. Getting the interview, Marcella, got you. Okay. All right. So thank you for answering that. And Again, we're going to dive a lot into interviewing, but I'm going to also give you some resources for some of the other opportunities that we have. The other thing I would encourage you to do today is, while we are on the call, I would love for you all to connect with each other. And so the best way we know to do that during this type of workshop is to connect through LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, and I hope that most of you are, because that is a brilliant way to connect with people, and that's where recruiters are sitting. And so we want to make sure that you are connected there. I'm going to drop in the instructions for how to connect on LinkedIn, how to put your URL in the chat right now. And I'm just going to copy those instructions real quick into the chat. So what you would do is drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. And to make it blue, you want to follow the process I just put into the chat. But basically, you want to go to your LinkedIn profile. You can go to your profile, or you can click on your picture, which will take you to your profile page. And in that top search bar is the URL to drop in this chat. And then this is the part a lot of people forget. They just drop their URL and then they walk away. They're like, cool, everyone will connect with me. Why don't you go and click on everybody else's LinkedIn profile and start to connect with them that way? Now, for some of you, there is a limit. Sometimes there's 5 a day, sometimes there's 10 a day. It depends on different levels of LinkedIn. So if you can't get in right now to all of them, everyone else, I want you to be connecting with each other so you can get connected. And I will make sure to scroll through at the end and connect with each of you as well. So you don't need to waste one of your connections on me, because I'll go through and connect with you, and I have unlimited because I have the paid version. But you connect with people you don't know on here, and so that you can build out your profile, your LinkedIn connections. All right, so here's what we're going to do today. I am going to spend some time talking about the hiring process in general and what it looks like. And a lot of people feel like this is legit feeling. You submit a resume and then you never hear back, and it's like this black hole. There's not really a black hole, but I know it feels like that. So submitting your resume, but I want to show you what a type of process looks like for hiring for any of you on the call that have never done hiring before or haven't seen this type of process. Then we're going to walk through the life cycle of an interview, how to prepare, how to craft your narrative and responses, what it looks like at the interview, and then I'll talk about some after interview strategies. Much of our time today is going to be spent on the preparing and crafting your narrative. So while we're doing this intro, what I want you to do is go get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, like really legit. Walk over, let me get one. Walk over, go somewhere in your house and grab a piece of paper, a real piece of paper, not your cell phone, and a pen, because I'm going to have you write some things today. Here's what we know about writing. When you write stuff down, you remember a significant amount more than if you type it into your phone or you just try to remember it. So really, 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 go get a piece of paper, go get a pen, and we're going to write some stuff down today, because I want you to be successful. This is all about you and how you can be successful and how you can have the best interview and make the best connections. All right, so that's what we're going to do. Grab a piece of paper and a pencil. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. There we go. All right, the hiring process, you guys. Let's talk about this. So the hiring process is all about making a connection, because by the time you get to the interview, you have already shown them, for the most part, that you are competent. So what the hiring process looks like, there's 3 main areas. There is, are you competent for the job? Are you a match character-wise? And then, do you have the fit? Are you the fit from a chemistry standpoint? And the chemistry standpoint is, do we like you? All right. And that is how we get to the culture match. So first, high level of the recruitment life cycle. This is not every life cycle. This is not what it looks like on everything, but this is the recruitment life cycle. There are a whole bunch of steps, is what I'm basically telling you. You don't even need to screenshot this. You don't need to write all this.
Excuse me, I don't mean to be rude, but you're going too fast.
Okay. Hold on. I can read in the chat, okay? Give me just a second to be there. I am asking everyone to stay muted. We will allow time for Q&A at the end. This call is being recorded, as I think you guys may have heard when you came in. This is being recorded, and you can go and play back any of it that you would like. So you don't need to you can take notes, because hopefully that will, you'll remember it. But this will all be played back. You're going to get an email at the end of this call, and it will have a link directly to this presentation and this webinar, as well as a whole bunch of resources. So you can screenshot all you want, and you're also going to get the playback. So we are on a limited time of 3 hours, and so that I can get through the interview, I need to get to the interview part, the part that you're really going to value, and then, but you can also go playback. So high level overview is, this is a recruitment life cycle, and the life cycle is from the time you submit a resume to all of the things they go through. So they may have one person do a screening. They may have 2 or 3 hiring managers. They may bring you in for a panel interview. They may do a Zoom interview. Lots of different options here. And so there's a lot. Every time I work with clients, the companies that are hiring, it's different. Every company does it differently. But I can tell you that most companies have a lot of steps. And so I know it can get really frustrating. Like, I sent my resume in, I'm a perfect match for this job, and I haven't heard back, and I haven't heard back. Or I interviewed 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't heard back anything. I know it's so frustrating. And also understand that the company is going through their process and their steps. So this is just to understand there are a lot of steps, you guys. There are a lot of steps. But what I want to do is make sure that when you get into that interview, that's your time to shine. And so first thing we're going to look at is the competence. The competence side is, can you do this job? Do you have the experience to do this job? We're going to talk about, how do you figure that out? How do you know if you have the competence? Then we're going to jump into the character side, about how do I evaluate if I am a match for the company? And then the last one is, do they like me? Do I like them? It's not just all about them. It's, do we like each other? Can we work together? All right, so competence. The competence side is, do I have the experience? Do I know enough of the information to do this job and to do it well? So here's a basic job description. I just pulled a generic job description off the internet. This one is a project manager. So when you're looking at a job description, this is the place to go to know if you have the competence to do the job. Looking at the responsibilities, looking at the requirements, those 2 sections. What are the responsibilities for the job? And what are the requirements for the job? Those 2 sections are the ones that are going to tell you if you have the ability to complete the job and do it well. So a lot of times I tell people, go through that. And if it's like 80%, then go for it. You want to spend your time and energy on the jobs that you are qualified for, that you have a really good chance of moving forward in. So I hear these stories all the time of, I've applied for 500 jobs and nobody has gotten back to me. And the reality of that is, the more jobs you apply for, the lower amount that will respond to you. And that is because likely you're not spending the time, energy, and effort to really understand the job you're applying for and update your resume for that particular job and network for that particular job. because doing those things takes time. You cannot submit to 100 jobs a day if you're taking the time to connect to the right jobs for you. So think about that. When you're looking at this resume, or I'm sorry, when you're looking at this job description, if you're looking at it and you're going, oh, you know, I've done a scope of project work before. I know how to map requirements. I know how to forecast and allocate, do allocation of resources and budgets. I've done budgets. Like if you're going through there and going, yes, 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 then you're like, one area is like I haven't really done that, but I could totally do that. Or for example, down in the requirements, it talks about MS Project as the software that it uses. Maybe you use another system. Maybe you use Monday.com or Asana or a different project management system. No big deal. That is no big deal. You would still apply for this because if you're going 80-20, right? At least 80% of the job I could do. I know this job. I know it well. Or, hey, I've done a version of that, not exactly, but a version of that. Or I've been in training and I've gotten, you know, training in project management. I have my project management certification. Maybe I haven't done all the stuff, but I know how to do it. All of that. Those are the type of jobs you're going to focus on. Don't focus on all the other jobs that like pie in the sky, right? These are jobs that you really qualify for. And then hopefully you maybe have attended the resume workshop that we've done. There was one on Tuesday. We have more coming up if you have any, if you want to attend those. And Brenda and Lori do a great job teaching those workshops. And so in those workshops, we talk about how to update your resume, what the format should look like, and how you integrate the keywords in your resume so that they match. So this part, this is where you decide, am I going to go after this job? Do I want to go after this job? And it's really through the job description. I know that probably seems like, hello, I know that. You know, that doesn't take a major rocket scientist to figure out. Well, honestly, the whole job search process doesn't take a rocket scientist, but we still got to do the things that we need to do to make it work. And this part is digging into the job descriptions, understanding the responsibilities, and making sure you're at least 80% qualified for this job. And then you apply for it. So that's just a little bit on the job description and how you know if you are competent, because then the company is going to evaluate you, and they're going to evaluate you on these 3 areas. And the first one is your skills. Do you have the capabilities to do the job? The capabilities would be, technical capabilities would be any software programs that you need to know. You know, simple things, even like Microsoft Office. If you are pursuing any kind of office position and you aren't super familiar with Microsoft Office, like Word, Excel, Outlook, those kind of things, then you can jump in and get some online training that's free. That's really important. So really look at those job descriptions that you're pursuing and figure out, do I have the capabilities to do that job? What about leadership? That's going to be a skill that's in there. Do you have the leadership and the professional soft skills that they're asking for? So I'm going to go back up to the job description so we can look at this job description and we can see what are some of the things they are asking for. The very last bullet under candidate requirements is the ability to manage medium-sized teams, contractors, vendors, and suppliers in remote locations. So that is a leadership or a professional soft skills trait. Do you have that? And do you want to do that? Some people are like, I am so done managing people. I am not going to be a leader anymore in that capacity. I can lead in other ways, but I want to be an individual contributor. I don't want to have a team. But this is asking for that. So you need to, on your resume, make sure that that's in there because they're evaluating you based on the job requirements. Skills or technical skills, any of your professional or soft skills, and your job requirements. So I was asked last week if I would go in and teach a group of high school students. Actually, it's high school and some college, so it's ages 16 to 20. If I would go teach them for a morning, these are students that are part of an internship program for actually a large government organization in Arizona, because I'm based in Arizona. And they're coming in for an internship. And they said, we want you to teach the top skills that are required in the workforce. And, you know, I'm going to go in and talk about communication and showing up on time and, you know, the basics. But then there are the not basics. The ones, though, that are drastically rising high on what companies are looking for right now. And one of them, a big one, is initiative and taking initiative and problem solving. So in your work, have you done, are you able to take initiative to solve problems? Or are you the one that typically is going to your boss with problems? If you're the one that's taking initiative and solving problems, that's the person companies want to hire. They want someone who's going to come in and help them fix stuff, not come in and go, this is an issue, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. So if you are this person, the taking initiative person, the problem solver, that is a big deal. And I want you to make sure that's on your resume, because companies are looking for that in a bad way. With all of the new tools coming out with artificial intelligence and AI, and companies are incorporating at every single level. If you can spend some time on some AI tools, which I'll talk about later, and they're not hard, you guys. They are not hard. It's as easy as doing a Google search. That's how simple it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about utilizing AI tools, but these are the kind of requirements and skills that you need to make sure are incorporated in your resume so you can get into the interview. And then they'll look at your experience to decide on your skill set. Do you have your experience listed in that is somewhat a match for what they're looking for? If you're looking to be a project manager, they need to know that you've done this type of work in some capacity before. Maybe it has been an internship. Maybe it's even been a volunteer position. Those all count. I love when I talk to parents that are coming back into the workforce after raising their kids for a period of time. And one of my favorite things to do is just to speak life into people that are going back into the workforce, because I always hear things like, well, I've been just a mom, or I've been just a dad, and I've raised my kids. No, you haven't been just a mom, just a dad. You have been a mom, you have been a dad, and you've also taken care of your house, probably volunteered for the PTA, maybe you serve at your church, maybe you do you have to really step back and look at all of the things you've done, because that counts as experience. If you, oh my gosh, God bless the people and the parents that support our school's PTA and run these big events and these fairs to raise money for the school. Like, thank you for doing that, because most people don't want to, and you do a great job. So you think about that from a project standpoint, your experience there. So you put down your experience, doesn't matter, volunteer or internships, maybe it's an apprenticeship, or it's a full-time job, or it's a side gig, or you have been a consultant. One of my daughters is 18, and she graduates high school this year, and she does not want to go to college. So my first went off to college. He's a chemical engineer. He lives in South Carolina, and our middle child, doesn't want to go to college. And there's so many options out there for people that don't want to go to college. And so she said, I want to start working. I want to make money. I want to save enough money so that I can move out on my own. And she has like this plan. So what is she doing? She gets on care.com and she becomes a nanny. You guys, nanny, my 18-year-old daughter is getting nanny jobs for $30 an hour. $30 an hour for a nanny job. I'm like, what are these people doing that they can pay a nanny $30 an hour? $30 an hour for a full-time nanny job. And so she does that, and she's doing Uber Eats at night, driving around and doing Uber Eats and on the weekends. So she's making great money for an 18-year-old senior in high school. So those jobs, even though they're not full-time W-2 jobs, those jobs count. She's running her own business. It's a side gig. It's both. Those would count on her resume. So make sure if you have a side gig, oh, I wish I had the number here. I was teaching another workshop on where the jobs are 2 weeks ago. I think it's over 50%. I can't remember exactly the number, but something like over 50% of people in the US have a side gig, have something else they do. I run a nonprofit, I have a consulting business, and then I have a couple side gigs. Like, it's so normal. So make sure that kind of stuff is on your resume. You know what? I haven't been able to stop and read the chat yet, but which I will. But go ahead in the chat. If you have, outside of the job you're looking for, so I know many of you are looking for full-time jobs right now, write in the chat if you have a side gig, if you're doing something extra just to bring in some money right now. Maybe you are running Uber Eats. Maybe you're doing Uber. Maybe you're doing consulting. Like if you're doing something on the side, write that in the chat so we can see what some of the examples are. In the summer, we rent out our pool. How crazy is that? We have people coming in our backyard and swimming in our pool and having birthday parties. We have like 4 or 5 birthday parties every weekend, kids' birthday parties. And it's so fun to hear all these kids screaming and laughing and having a blast. And these little kids, because we're kind of specialized in little kids and kids parties. And it's hilarious. We don't have the little kids in our house anymore because our youngest is 16. And so, you know, we can make a part-time income on that. Yes, so eBay, tutoring, perfect. These are the kinds of things I'm talking about, is those all count as experience. Volunteering absolutely counts. So make sure all of that is included on your resumes and don't discount it. Now, you don't have to include every volunteer position, and our resume writers can talk to you about how to, you know, focus that. But if it qualifies and you're doing something that would be for the job you're applying for, absolutely, you want to include that. Okay, now education is the third way that we figure out if you're qualified and have the skills. So in job descriptions, you will see if there's a required training, education, degree, something. Education, of course, you would look at that. And also certifications, additional types of training, what is required in the job description. And there is a huge trend right now, removing the 4-year degree requirement. Now that's not true on everything. Of course, we want our doctors to be degreed, engineers need their degree. A lot of jobs and industries, you need your degree. But and many companies have now taken a stand. If it's not essential to the job function, they're removing it. So if you're looking at a job description and you're thinking, I've done this job, I'm qualified, I just never finished my degree, and there's a degree requirement on there. Look at me. Don't stop. Apply for that job, especially if you meet at least 80% of the criteria. Because experience wins over the degrees most of the time. Not all companies, some companies still require that, but it is a huge trend in the market right now. Certifications and training oftentimes are a higher level qualifier than the degrees. Now, I have my undergrad, I went back and got my master's, and I am at education, like, big deal. It's a big deal. I think it's a big deal. But also I understand the market and what the market's calling for. And I also have a daughter that's like, I'm not going to college. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to fight with you on that. You go be successful. You do you. I love you and I want you successful in your life. And so she's doing what she's going to do. If all my kids can run businesses and run their own businesses, have their own side gigs or maybe full businesses, then great. The kid that's an engineer also does investments. And so he's learning to do both, because one thing I know is when Mark and I were going through the Great Recession and didn't have jobs, it was freaking scary. And I know some of you are sitting there today going, it is freaking scary. And it's why I launched this organization. I don't want anyone in the future to ever feel like that. Like I know how we felt. And so whatever it is, side gigs, extra income, multiple revenue streams, whatever it is, so that you're never feeling like I'm tied to a job and an income from a job. Now, an income from a job is awesome. And it's what we're trying to help you do. And also have these other things going on. So any kind of training, certifications, anything you've done, that goes on your resume as well, but don't disqualify yourself because of it either. All right, so that's the competence piece. That is the competence piece, and I'm just gonna look through to see if we have any questions here. I think people are answering. Thank you everyone for answering these questions. Okay, great. All right. So we're going to move on to the character piece now. So that was all competence. Now character. Character is about, are you a match for the company? So competence was on the job. Are you a match for the job? Competence is about the company. Competence is about the job. Character is about the company. Do you have the right character match for that company? And do they have the right one for you? So what kind of behavior traits do they have? Are you a match there? What kind of, you can look at their culture on their website. You can kind of see, hey, this is the kind of company they are. And what does their social media say about them? So here are some things that you might care about from a behavior standpoint. So is the company one? I worked for Intel for 10 years, and it wasn't my first job, but it was like my first kind of real professional job. When I was 24, I walked in, and it's kind of funny. I walked into Intel when I was 24, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my dream job. I'm going to retire here. And 10 years later, Intel was like, no, you're not. And they laid off 10,000 people at that time, and our whole department got let go. And so I went through that, and it was a real like, whoa, I didn't have a community of friends outside of Intel. Almost everything I knew, the way I talked, all the people I hung out with were Intel people. And so when I got outside of Intel, I was like, whoa, there is a world out here I didn't even know about. But what I liked about Intel, and the reason I pursued them and working there, was because they were a technology company, fast moving for the most part. It's still a Titanic, and you still got to move the Titanic, but for the most part, for a technology company, it was pretty fast moving at that time. And they had a culture of constructive confrontation, which is having hard conversations and not letting things sit. So there were a couple things that really resonated with me, and they treated their employees well. I can't speak to today. I have a lot of friends that do work at Intel and people that have been there and have left. And so the company has changed over the years, and I know it's still a great place to work for many, many people. But I loved my time there. And so that culture was a great match for me. If you are but they change a lot. There's a lot of change that happens there. And so if you are somebody who is more, I like to know what's happening, consistent, not a lot of change or movement, then that's probably not the company for you. So when you are out searching for companies to apply for and to talk to, you want to make sure that they're a match. Because when you go into the interview, it is so easy to connect with a company, with people interviewing you, if you know you love the company. And that's one of the ways you can flip this whole interview thing on its head. So to learn a little bit about yourself, here is a DISC assessment you can take. It's a behavioral assessment. In the email that we send you guys after the call today, there will be a link in there for you to click on and just go straight to this assessment. So you can click on the assessment, It'll take you about 15 minutes, and then you're going to get a 24-page report that tells you all about your behavior style. So for example, on what you're seeing here, this is somebody who is very people oriented, that is outgoing, loves to talk to people. They might be in sales, they might be in some type of influencing or negotiating or speaking job. They would die a slow death if they were in as an accountant sitting in a cubicle running spreadsheets. So this is the kind of thing, when you see it, it will validate for yourself, okay, yes, I know what I need to be looking for. So I was working with this lady, gosh, it's been a couple years now, working with her, and she was struggling to find her next job. And so we were working on her resume, and I was helping her with her LinkedIn profile, and I was doing some interview coaching with her. So I can't remember her name. I'm going to call her Sharon. It wasn't Sharon, but I'm going to use Sharon as her name. So Sharon was telling me, or we were going through her resume. I was asking questions. Hey, tell me about what you've done. I see your experience here. Da, da, da. And before I met with her, I had her take the DISC assessment. So I got the DISC assessment results, and I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at her resume, and her DISC assessment results look similar to what you're seeing on the screen. These are not her results, but they were similar. But she was an accountant. And I said to her, Sharon, excuse me, it's odd because I'm surprised that someone with your behavioral traits has been an accountant. That it doesn't seem to, add up. Most times, and a person that's in accounting is going to be more on the analytical side, on the details side. And so she takes a deep breath. She goes, I hate accounting. It was like confession. She'd been doing it for 20 years, you guys. And I was like, whoa, okay. You hate accounting. Why have you been doing it for 20 years? And she said, because my dad told me it would be a good career, a good college degree. And so I did it. And that's what I've been doing for 20 years. It was like she'd been, in confession and needed to get this off her chest. And so I was like, all right. So what are we going to do with this? Now that we see your style and we know your experience, I said, let's talk about what you liked about your job. And I said, tell me a little bit about that. And so she did. She started telling me about one of the things she really liked about her job was being able to go into different areas of different departments, factories, because she was at a factory. She was working on the corporate side. But at factories, they had warehouses and manufacturing facilities. And she would go in and implement these accounting systems at all the locations. And I, why did you like that? What did you do? And so we talked a lot about why she liked that. And she liked it because she was working with people. And it was something different every day. It wasn't sitting in and, running spreadsheets or doing the financials every day, doing reports. And so what we did was redid her whole resume, her LinkedIn profile, to really focus more on the project management and the implementation side of the finance world. So she still had a ton of skills. She'd been doing this for 20 years, over 20 years. But we just had to reframe things a little bit. So if that's where you are today, if you're like, I do not want to do what I have been doing, then you spend some time up front really focusing on what you liked about your previous jobs. Because when you go into the interview, the way that you interview says everything about you. People don't want to hire people that are like, yeah, I can do spreadsheets. Yep, I can run reports. I'm good at it. I've been doing it for 20 years. No. They want to hire someone who's like, yeah, I'm really good and I love it. And I'm super detail oriented, which is, one of my normal natural traits. And I could run spreadsheets all day long. I could run reports. I can find the details. In fact, I have a volunteer right now today. Her name is Susan, and she is excellent at the detail stuff. In fact, it just hit me. I'm going to go have her do a scrub of all of our communications because she's doing scrubs of some of the communications. But if you got your text today, it said the wrong workshop. And I'm like, she needs to go do the scrub, not the firm we're using. So I'm going to have her do the scrub because she's so detail oriented and she loves it. She loves it so much that I said I'm pulling together some of our volunteers and staff to do this team building day. And I sent, the invite to all of our staff and volunteers. And they said, she emailed me and she said, Jessica, thank you so much for the invitation, but I am super introverted. And that kind of environment just stresses me out. So I am so happy to be able to write and to do stuff alone. And is that okay? And I'm absolutely, you don't have to come and spend time with us. But she likes one-on-one time with me and she likes to do the details. Perfect. So you know who you are. So spend that time in learning and knowing and validating who you are and what you do really, really well. And then on the assessment, here's two of my favorite pieces on the right-hand side. Your ideal environment is there, and then your value to the organization. So if this is a version of your assessment and you see assignments with a high degree of people contacts, that's going to be really important for you for when you're going into the interview. So you can ask questions around that. Will I be leading teams or will I be part of a team? I don't do great when I'm on my own trying to figure things out. I need to run ideas through people. So you can use this to as a tool in your interviewing process. Okay, moving on to some of the top skills. So I mentioned this a little earlier about some of the professional skills. These are the top 10 skills in the marketplace right now that employers are looking for. And also 2 more that are rising quickly. I mentioned taking initiative and problem solving, which problem solving is on here. Those 2 kind of go together. But the other one that's not on here, that is rising quickly, is the ability to understand and decipher information. The reason that one is coming fast and hard is because the whole AI integration across the workforce. So artificial intelligence, it's here. It's drastically changing the way companies are doing business. They're looking for people that can understand the information that comes out from these AI tools, and you can read it, understand if it's right or it needs tweaked or it's completely wrong, and then push it out. So the ability to have those critical thinking skills is really, really important. So all of these are the skills that we're looking for. If you feel like there's an area that you're not, that you maybe need some work on, then I would encourage you to go do some training, take some soft skills training. The word is changing from soft skills. You might hear from professional skills, but really the ability to integrate well into companies. This is what they're looking for right now. All right. Just going through here, looking at the questions. Thank you, guys. Hassam, so the difference between natural and adaptive on the disc is around natural is how you naturally are. And I'm going to go back real quick. The right side is how you are naturally in kind of normal life, everyday life. Adapted is what your job is calling for you to be right now. So if you are in career transition, these could be way off. Also, if you're in a job that isn't really a good fit for you, and so maybe on this person's adapted style, the blue is way high, which is what was happening to that lady I was working as an accountant. So her blue line was way high on the left side, and on the right side, her blue was way low. That was a mismatch. And so I just asked questions about it. And that's how that all came out. So in the assessment, it will tell you more about what that means. Okay. I wish I had more time to do that, but we're not going to be able to spend more time. But the tool is there and it's available for you guys. Okay, so now let's talk about the interview life cycle. So getting into the interview, this is what it might look like. Again, it's another version of the recruiter life cycle, but it is many steps could be taken in this process. Again, you can have a moment where you have to do a skills assessment. You might have to do behavioral assessments. You might have to do phone calls, in person, Zoom, panel. There's so many type of interviews, all the way through negotiation and final offer, and offer acceptance. And so there, it is quite a life cycle, but here are some of the types of interviews you might come across. So often you'll get the initial interview with a recruiter. It'll be some type of screening interviews. A lot of times those are done by phone. And so it might be a short interview, just making sure that you have the requirements of the job. They're really looking at competency for the most part on those interviews. You do want to try to make some connection with them, but you don't want to try and over talk. You really want to answer their questions because they're checking to make sure you do have the experience that they're looking for. And so also Zoom interviews, Microsoft Teams, there's various different platforms now, but Zoom and Microsoft Teams seem to be some of the big ones that people are using, sometimes WebEx, but that people are using for the Zoom calls. So when you are setting up for those, I want to make sure that you have a decent background. It can be just a plain wall, it doesn't matter, but you don't want anything distracting. You don't want your kids running behind you. So you do want to get to a quiet place when you are doing a Zoom call. Then panel interviews, those are when more than 2 people. I would love in the chat, can somebody tell me a little bit more about what is the largest panel interview you've ever had? How many people? Were there 3? Were there 4? Were there 7? How many people? Amber had 6 on hers. 8. That's a lot, Caroline. 8 is a lot. 3 is pretty normal. Yep. For Fontip, 6. That's a lot, you guys. It's because when you're doing panel interviews, a goal of the panel interview is to really try to engage every person. And so making sure you are answering a question when someone asks it, so you're responding to them, but also you're kind of pulling in all the other people. Kimberly, it's not terrifying because I'm going to show you how to answer these questions and how you get to be yourself. And so it kind of feels like, have you ever seen like a movie or something where this person's sitting in a chair and it's like a light is right on them, and that feels terrifying. Everyone's looking at me, the light is shining on me. But when you go into these interviews, I want you to be more calm. I want you to be more relaxed. And the way you can do that is be confident in your answers and who you are and your experience, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. And then the informal interviews. I like to tell this story. So was doing an informal interview, which means sometimes informal interviews can be meeting for coffee, going to lunch, you know, doing something that's not like in a formal conference room. So informal interview, I was conducting an informal interview with this candidate. We had flown from out of town. And so basically, if you ever fly somewhere to do an interview for a company, a lot of times you'll just have a packed calendar. You're talking breakfast, then you have a morning of interviews. Maybe you're going to watch them do something, or you're attending a team meeting, you're going to lunch, then you're doing some stuff in the afternoon, maybe you're doing panel interviews, and then you're going to dinner. And by the time you get back to your hotel, it's like you collapse because it's exhausting. So all of those are parts of the interview process. And by the time you get to dinner, you may be exhausted. And maybe you want to order a glass of wine and spaghetti. Okay? But here's the thing. The companies are still interviewing you. And I'm not going to tell you what's good or right or what's bad or, you know, not, but I can tell you that however you interview in those lunch, breakfast, lunch, informal interviews is going to say a lot about you. Because how are you treating the staff, the waiter, the person that seats you, Are you ordering 2 or 3 or 4 glasses of wine? Are you ordering something that's going to make a mess? Could make a mess all over you. All of that is part of the interview process because the company is looking at you as, how is this person representing us as an organization? And so my personal opinion is if I'm on any kind of interview, typically networking, anything, I'm not drinking alcohol. And don't get me wrong, I love a glass of wine. And I love a dirty martini. So I am not saying never drink. That's your decision to make. But I do not drink in any kind of company interviewing or networking situations. I do have maybe a glass of soda water with a lime because then it doesn't feel awkward or weird. So if you don't drink, great. Have a soda water with lime and you will feel like you just part of the group. And also don't order something really, really messy. The other thing is, if you are at a meal, I wouldn't encourage you not to order the most expensive thing on the menu. Again, you're still interviewing. This is not really an informal interview is my point. You are still interviewing. You're on the clock. Even if you've been interviewing or talking to them for 12 or 14 hours. All right, and then behavioral interviews are the most common. They're legally defensible, and it's what most people utilize. And so behavioral interviews are the ones that are like, tell me about a time. And I'm going to prepare you for those in just a few minutes. So let's talk about preparing. Preparing for your interview. What do you need to do? You might want to screenshot this with your phone, or you might want to play this back and go to this portion, especially as you're preparing for an interview. But what you want to do is make sure you know a lot about the company. And actually, you probably don't even want to apply to a job until you've done this work. And again, because when then somebody emails you for an interview and you get an interview request from a company that you've researched, you already know about them. You're excited. It will come off in your tone. I cannot tell you how many interviews I've done where someone's like, okay, tell me about your company again. And when they say that, it's an immediate no. It's an immediate no. They haven't cared enough to do any research. And so make sure that you know who the organization is. What are their goals? Do a Google News search to see if they've been in the news lately. And then also, who are you interviewing with? And you're going to want to do the research for who you're interviewing with. I always connect with them on LinkedIn if you know ahead of time, because that will tell you a whole bunch about the person and their company, and if you have any common interests. So here are some ways you can do the research. First of all is looking at their company website. I love this company and this example. So this company is Achieve, and they've been one of our partners for a very long time. But when I was putting this presentation together recently, when I started teaching this workshop a couple months ago, I went to their careers page because I know that is where you find information about a company. And so I went to their careers page, and this company helps with people who have significant debt. So they help them consolidate their debt. They help negotiate their debt down. They help do seconds. They help do a whole bunch of things to get your arms around your debt and to get out of debt. And they've just saved people, I mean, millions and millions of dollars. And so most of the time when you hear debt consolidation company, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, yuck. I would never want to work for a company like that. And can you imagine calling people over and over and over and trying to do collections? And that just sounds miserable. When I went onto their website to say, okay, what kind of people they hire, which I kind of already knew because I know this company for the last 10 years. And I know the HR VP who has created the culture there. But what they had on their website, their salespeople, they're looking for empathetic problem solvers. I would have never known that the sales employees for a debt collection company or debt consolidation company are looking for salespeople that are empathetic. How crazy is that? It sounds backwards to me. But I was like, I know why. And so I was talking to Linda, who's the HR VP there, and I said, tell me more about that. And she said, well, when people are in debt, they're in crisis. And it's kind of sometimes the worst moments of their lives. Maybe somebody has been in the hospital. Maybe something has happened with a child or a spouse, and they're in this terrible place in their life. The last thing we want to do is try and make a hard sale. What we're trying to do is help them, and we want to be empathetic. We want to listen to them, and we want to figure out ways to solve their problems. And I was like, brilliant. So this company looks for empathetic problem solvers as their employees for their sales team. And I would not have known that had I not been on their website. So if you're going to interview for Achieve and you come in there and you're like, I hit these numbers on my sales, I was hard driving here, I did this and this, they're not going to hire you. They don't want the typical salesperson. They want to know how you solve people's problems. That's what they care about. So this is all on the website. Also on the right-hand side on this slide, those are areas on a company's website that you can usually learn this kind of stuff. There's an About Us tab, meeting the team, the mission values, anything around leadership or stakeholders. I think somebody had put on here something about that, but their board of directors and then their careers page. All of that tells you information about the company. And then their website or their social media. So even if you're not, active on social media, you can still go look companies up on social media. So you can go to LinkedIn, which is a great place to go, especially if you don't use social media that much. You can just have a LinkedIn page as a landing page, and you can research a ton. But Facebook, Instagram, but one that I really, really love is YouTube. And the reason I love YouTube for company research is because the videos are often of employees or things that they're doing or the products they have. And so it gives you a feel for what they're about. It gives you a feel, and you can hear a lot of employees that work there. You can really hear like what they're dealing with and what's important to them. So I would encourage you to get onto their YouTube channel and look at the companies and find out what do they care about. Watch some of their shorts, some of their videos, especially as you're preparing for an interview. And then Google News is another really good one, because Google News it's not Google. I mean, they're associated obviously, but it's Google News. So it's going to give you the headlines of what's going on with that company. So jump over to Google News and do a quick search. You're not going to have to worry about all the ads. This is really just a list of what's going on in the news. And that's a great way to learn about the company. Are they expanding? Maybe they're downsizing. Maybe they're consolidating some locations. But it's a great way to learn about the company. And then, of course, LinkedIn. We cannot say enough about getting on LinkedIn and connecting with companies there. These stats are even 6 months old, so they're probably even way higher than this. But LinkedIn is the #1 place where recruiters are looking for talent. So you have to be on LinkedIn. And one of the things I love about LinkedIn is you can often connect directly with a recruiter or hiring manager that has posted a job on LinkedIn. So if you're not doing that yet, make sure you are. So apply for the job, like they say, after you've updated your resume, and then connect with the person that posted that job. And connect with anyone in your network that maybe works at that company. That's the networking side of this, which we're not going to dive into networking too much today. I think Brenda just taught a session for us last week on networking and branding, and so she probably went into more of this. But really, the networking piece is so important. And if you missed that workshop, it is on our playback feature, which will be in your email today. That you'll get. It'll have a link directly to all of the webinars we've taught up to date. So LinkedIn is an essential place. Okay, so now we're going into the meat, the real meat. So I kind of gave you an overview of how do you even get in? How do you get an interview? Now we're going to talk about when you're in the interview, how do you answer questions? How do you go through a process of answering a question so it relates, it answers the question, it's concise, but long enough to give the story of your answer. And here's the thing that's really important. So if you've tuned out a little bit, I want you to come back to me right now, because what they're doing in the interview, of course, is seeing if the chemistry is there, if they like you. And what they're validating is what you've done in the past. If you've done what they're needing you to do in the past, it is a predictor for what you will do in the future. So if they have a problem and they're trying to fix a manufacturing problem, and you can show them that you have fixed a manufacturing problem before, they're going to go, okay, that guy can do it in the future because he's done it before. So all of your answers need to be real examples of things you have done in the past. Does that make sense? All of the answers that you give in an interview need to be things that you have done in the past so they can see that you can do it in the future. Stay away from theory. Stay away from things like, well, if I was doing that job, this is how I would probably do that. Or this is the way I would maybe do that. Stay away from that and say, this is how I've done that. When things like that came, this is how I've addressed it. When I started a new job, let's say it's a manufacturing tech. When I started a new job as a manufacturing tech, I went in and I learned the systems and I jumped in and was able by day 2 to be fully on board. So that's what we're going to craft. And I think it was Michael. That's why I needed you all to get your pen and paper, because we're going to write some things down in just a minute. So if you haven't gotten your pen and paper, go grab it so we can write some things down. All right. Here's what we're going to do. I have 2 processes, and I'm going to have you do an example for each process. Okay. The first one is called your golden moments. So take a minute, and maybe you have your resume in front of you. If you don't, that's okay. But I want you to think about, what are some things in my past work life? Or if if you have a big gap in your work life, maybe it was a volunteer position. Maybe you've done some volunteering or some gig work or some side job. What are some things you've done? Pick one, actually. Think about something you've done in your past that you were like, I'm really proud of that. I did a really great job there. Maybe you hosted an event. Maybe you saved the company $50,000. Maybe you mentored somebody that went off and became, an exceptional employee. Maybe you ran a project team that implemented a software that was successful. What is a golden moment that you had? And take a minute and just don't follow the script yet. Just kind of jot it down so you remember, okay, what, right? 1 or 2 or 3, but just jot it down. What did I do? I ran a implementation for new software. What else did I do? Oh, I remembered that one time when I traveled to another country to do a training, and I was teaching in English, and it was a second language to them, but I was still able to connect and teach. What did you do that you feel like, I am really proud of that? Okay, so now that you have that little written down, follow this script. Tell us more. Tell yourself more. What was the situation? Maybe you maybe already wrote that line down. What was the situation? What was your responsibility? Okay, what was it? Then the second bullet here is, what was your role in that process? What was your role? So maybe it was an event. Okay, you write down the event. Maybe you did a fundraiser. let's play with fundraiser, okay? Maybe you did a fundraising event. And what was your role? Well, my role was I had to make sure everything was set up, all the logistics. But what else? Oh, I had to get the people there. So I had to do all the registration. I had to do the reach outs. Like, what was your role? Okay, write that down. What was your role? All right, now you kind of, okay, you're forming it, right? How did you go about it? How did you make it happen? Okay, let's talk about the fundraiser. Did I use a system? Did I write everything down in my phone as a list? Did I use a CRM, a customer, oh my gosh, I'm losing the name. Customer management system, basically. So it's a system that'll reach out to people through email, a database. Did I make phone calls? How did I negotiate with the venue? Maybe I got it for free. What steps and actions did I take to accomplish this golden moment? Take a minute and write that down. Okay, write a couple bullets about the actions that you took. All right, now, what was the result? Well, if I'm talking about the fundraiser, the result was we raised $62,000. That was the result. And we got 25 new donors. What was the result? All right, write your result down. What was the result? Isn't that awesome to kind of really dig into something you're really proud of, how you did it, what your role was in it, and the result? Like, that's pretty cool. Now ask yourself, what did I learn about myself? Or what did I learn about other people? Or about the job? Well, for the fundraising event, maybe I learned that it's actually not that hard to pick up the call. People will take my call. It's not that hard to pick up the phone. Maybe I learned that that venue, even though it was free, was not the right venue for the way that we want to do this in the future. Or maybe I learned I never want to do another golf fundraiser again. I would prefer to do some type of networking where people are talking closer together and we're building closer relationships. What did you learn about yourself? And then how do you operate now as a result of that? Is there something you do differently? Like now, if this is my story, maybe I would say I need to really have somebody around me that is super detail oriented to make sure they do get all the details, because I don't get all the details. I do not. And so what I need to make sure I have somebody helping on our team that is gifted there, so that they're watching all the communications going out, that they're tracking the project. Like how do I operate now? Okay, so that is a golden moment, you guys. That's a golden moment. And we're going to walk through one more process on how to develop these. But what you're doing right now is you're developing a story. And you're going to spend the time to develop 10 stories. We're not going to do it right now, but you're going to develop 10 stories total. And so some people like this method and some people like the next method I'm going to show you. But when you develop 10 stories and then you'll walk through them like this, then when you go into an interview, you're going to recall some of these stories. In fact, what I'm going to tell you to do is I'm going to tell you to bring the list of the 10 stories, just like, for example, if the fundraiser was one of my stories and it took me the whole page to develop it, I'm just going to put, whatever it was, a 2024 raffle fundraiser for this company. And I'm just going to have that as a line item on my notes when I walk into the interview. Because if you've written these stories out, then when somebody asks you a question, these stories, one of them at least is going to be able to answer their question. So let me give you an example. If somebody asks me a question like, tell me about a time that you had to have a difficult conversation with somebody, with a colleague or a peer. The worst possible answer you could ever say is, you know what? I get along with everyone. I don't really have hard conversations. That's like the worst possible answer, because they are actually looking for someone. We all have hard conversations. And if we don't, there's a reason, because you're an avoider. Or, you know, the person you're interviewing is an avoider. They don't. And most companies don't want to hire somebody that won't have hard conversations. Actually, I've never met a company that was like, oh, we don't care. No one needs to have hard conversations here. So when someone asks that question and you look down at your notes, because you're allowed to bring notes into your interviews, you look down at that list of 10, I can go, oh, that event fundraiser. Oh yeah, I remember that. Okay. So they just asked me, tell me about a time you had to have a difficult conversation. And my answer can come from this story. Even though I didn't write it down, I could say it. So I was running this project where we were hosting an event, a fundraiser for this nonprofit organization for our foundation. And I was the project manager over it. And during that time, we had to work with the previous department or previous person that ran this project. And she and I did not see eye to eye on the way the communication should go out. She kind of thought, hey, let's do handwritten cards and as an invite, and then also as a thank you. And with the way digital media is today, I really wanted to do more through email and through texting campaigns. And she just thought that was not relational enough. And so we sat down, I sat her down, and here's the conversation we had. And so what we ended up doing was we did all the digital pieces. We sent text messages, but we also incorporated phone calls. And then at the end, instead of spending money on print and postage up front, we did write handwritten thank you cards to any of the new donors that we got. So I just answered that question, and I didn't have to come up with a memorized question and answer. And it came from one of my stories, and it was authentic and it was real. I mean, that situation was fake, but like, that's an example of what you do. So I'm sure people have come up against that situation that have done fundraising events. So what you just did for the company you're interviewing with, even if it's not a fundraising company, what I just did was I said, I know how to have hard conversations. And I also know how to, when I've done the research, do things differently, and it's okay. So what the company heard in that example was, you know how to have hard conversations. You sat down professionally, had a meeting with them, and had a conversation about what it looked like before and why you wanted to do it differently. And you came to an agreement and you moved forward and everyone was happy and you were able to work together. That's what they care about is, have you done this before? Then you can do this in the future. You can have those hard conversations. I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually, I was doing an interview, and I asked a question about a difficult conversation. And he was like, well, my difficult conversation was that, well, you know, the company just didn't want to pay me what I was worth. So I just told them that. I was like, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. How did you tell them? What was the process? And they're like, well, you can't abuse me. So you need to pay me more. And I just was like, okay, that's not how you answer that question. You want to make sure you answer it professionally and you give the example of what you've done. So that's one I would love if somebody takes a second a couple of you in the chat and tell us about your golden moment. Tell us, what did you do? And I know this takes a minute, so I'm going to move on to the next section, but if you can write this out for us, I would love to read some of these. In fact, you know what, you guys, I'm going to do? I am going to do this. If you connect with me on LinkedIn and you send me a couple of your golden moments, I will shout you out on LinkedIn, tag you, and do like a shout out post for you. I've done this before with some of my other workshops, and I've asked for a list of companies, and that's for something else. I want you to spend time on your golden moments. So I want you to send me a couple stories, a couple of your golden moments, and I'm going to do a shout out. Maybe you're an operations manager and you saved a company $50,000, $100,000 by changing this one process. Walk me through that and I'll shout you out on LinkedIn. All right, so that's a golden moment. Then you have the STAR model, which some of you may be familiar with. There is STAR and there is PAR. So STAR is situation, task, action, result. PAR, P-A-R, is problem, action, result. So basically, it takes the T and the task and the action and pushes those two together, because sometimes those two are hard. So I want you to do this again. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to think about a situation. It doesn't have to be a golden moment, but like, what is a situation, a hard situation or an opportunity that you had? Maybe you had a situation where you were so busy with whatever, projects, events, taking phone calls, whatever it was. You were so busy that you needed to figure out a different system for your workload. What was the situation? I want you to spend a few minutes. What was the situation? Then we're going to go into the task and the action. What needed to happen and what action steps did you take? Again, sometimes these two are put together. Sometimes people like to see it like, okay, the tasks that I had to do were these things. And then the actions I took were based off of those tasks. So they can be the same or they can be two different things. What were the tasks and the action you had to take to solve this problem or to create this opportunity? And then what was the outcome? Describe the outcome. And here's another way to look at it. So I want you to do this. Pen and paper again. So when you get out of this workshop today, you're going to have at least 2 stories. When I am teaching this in person, face to face, we usually work on 3 if we have the time. And we get in groups and we help each other. But because we're virtual, you're going to write this out. And I want you to think about, what is a situation that you had? Maybe it was a problem that you had to solve. Maybe somebody approached you with an opportunity and you're like, oh man, that would be great. I just don't know how to do it. So write it down. When was it? Where was it? What was the situation? Go ahead and write that down. I remember when COVID happened, and in 2020, we were sitting at an event, and we usually had about 100, 150 people show up to our in-person events. Home base is in Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I am right now. And we had nothing online. Everything was in person. And it was March of 2020. And I looked at my event director, Sheila, who I adore and love her. She's no longer with Career Connectors, but she's doing great things. In fact, I get to see her tomorrow night. I'm so excited. We're going to dinner and to a show. One of our previous board members is in a play. So excited about that. I haven't seen her in a long time. So the situation was, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I guess we're done. Like my brain was, COVID has hit us. We can't do in-person events. And I was heartbroken because I thought all these people are going to be losing their jobs. And what are they going to do? And do they have people to, help and provide hope and provide guidance? Like I was like, I'm like, we're done. I guess we're done. And Sheila looks at me. She turns her head and she goes, we're not done. We have an event scheduled next week. It's going to happen. I don't know how yet, but we're going to do it. So the situation for us was COVID, right? And that was the background. And that was the context. We were sitting in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was March of 2020. What's, provide those details. And for you, actually write the details out. Because if you write the details out, then when you're thinking about the story, it will come easier. You'll remember more. So that was the background. Now think about the task. What were the challenges? What needed to be done? So the task for us was all these people were getting laid off and they needed help. Still, even though we couldn't provide in-person venues. And if you guys remember, prior to 2020, even though there were tools like Zoom and WebEx, there were some tools out there, no one really used them on the regular. And I wish I would have bought stock in Zoom in 2019, but because it exploded. But that was the challenge. People still needed help. In fact, more people than ever needed help. And what we had to provide something, what needed to be done and why. So write that down. Spend a second here and write that down. And then elaborate. What actions did you take? What tools did you use? So for us, Sheila said, it's happening. So we jump on a call that afternoon. And I said, what in the heck are we going to do? And she said, well, there's Zoom. There's some other tools. I'm like, nobody knows how to do it. She goes, we're going to teach people. We're going to show them. We're going to make it easy. And so I'm like, all right. And so we start brainstorming and we take specific actions and we start getting communications out and we start putting things on social media. And we were putting this stuff out on social media before we even knew the answers to what we were doing. We didn't know if our speakers knew how to present through Zoom. I'm like, we have to figure this out. And so as Sheila was getting the tech side ready, I was doing the marketing communication and reach out to our speakers and putting this program together and our hiring companies. Because at the time we were bringing hiring companies in. Well, some of these hiring companies we had booked were no longer hiring. So it was even figuring that out. What tools did we use? What project planning system? Write that out. What actions did you take? And then the results. What happened? For us, we were the only organization at the time, within a week after the world shut down, that provided some type of place for people to go that lost their jobs. The government shut down, couldn't even get through to unemployment. Other organizations that were helping people with job search, not available. So we had over 300 people that day of our event jump on the Zoom call. We were able to at least provide the information we knew. I had connections into the unemployment office, was able to get them on a Zoom call and say, what is going on? They couldn't do it on their own because they're systems, but they could come to our program and talk about it. So we started doing daily chats, daily information for people to help them through this difficult time. It was exceptional because it changed our business model. So we were now able to reach a national audience, not just local. So that is a pretty cool story. That's why I'm walking you through it. What are your cool stories? They don't need to be that big. They can be that maybe you're in retail and you changed the way that a customer navigates checking out, the way that the sales racks look and the clothes look on the sales rack. It matters because if you write the stories out, you can speak to them when you're getting an interview. All right. So those are two different ways that you can develop your stories. And so I want you to spend time writing out 10 stories and do it within the next week. Don't wait until the day before you're interviewing, because If you wait until the day before you're interviewing, then you're trying to cram it all in. And the day before you're interviewing, what you need to do is prepare for that interview, not prepare this part. Because if you have this all planned out and all your stories developed, your planning is just doing more research on the company, reviewing your stories, just going into them and saying them to yourself again and remembering all of them and the details. Because when you go into your interview, you know the stories. You're not having to be like, okay, I prepared for the difficult conversation. What did I say? What did I say was my answer? Like, that's not going on anymore. Instead, you're just looking down at your sheet and you're like, oh, this one was a difficult story, a difficult situation. I can talk about this number 4 story here. Okay. That's how I want you to change your interview model. So here are some of the types of questions you're going to get asked. So again, 10 stories I want you to develop. 10. And if you can send me on LinkedIn a couple, then I would love to shout you out and do a LinkedIn shout out. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you've seen I've done some of these shout outs to people to help them connect with different companies. All right. So it's all about connecting. I am the career connector. That's what I do. And I am telling you, it works. If it weren't for relationships and connections, there is no way I would get to do the work I get to do. Same with you. Make the connections happen so you can get in the door, but then land these interviews by doing it this way. I promise it works. I wouldn't be teaching it if it didn't. So here are some of the examples. Behavioral, we're going to step that one aside because all of your stories you're developing are going to answer any of those behavioral questions. This one, here are 4 questions that almost always happen in some fashion. The tell me about yourself. Strengths and weaknesses, and why should we hire you? Okay, so first, tell me about yourself. Here's a couple things they're trying to do. They're trying to get a verification of your resume and a verification of what they think they know about you. They want to know if basically what you've told them up to this point is true. So it needs to be, and then they want to get to know you a little bit, but they don't want your whole life story, okay? They want to get to know you a little bit. So if for this question, think through, make sure you have your resume. You always want to bring in extra copies of your resume. I'll talk about that in a minute. But you want to give a brief overview of your experiences and throw in a success or 2 there. Say, here are my last couple positions. One of the cool things I got to do at this job was this, and you get to tell a success. And then, and make it somewhat relatable to the job you're getting ready or you're interviewing for. So even though you don't need to memorize these, you still want to kind of practice. Tell me about yourself, because so many people get this wrong. Either they just tell about the last job and that's it, or they say, well, what do you want to know? That always cracks me up. I'm like, well, you need to tell me about yourself. So a brief overview of your experiences, or they go on forever. I was interviewing this candidate one time, and I do some stuff in ministry and churches. I hire pastors and ministry staff and for different churches. And I was asking this guy who was going to be I think he was an adult ministry pastor. So he's going to oversee like a whole bunch of adult programming. And I asked him about, hey, why don't just kind of give me an overview, tell me about your experience, tell me about yourself. And I kid you not, he talked straight for 25 minutes. I tried to interrupt him 3 times. And at the end of that, I was like, all right, well, we're out of time. And so I cut the interview off. It was done. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy would drive people crazy. And so think about that. You need to make your tell me about yourself not super brief, but like get to the point. Like tell a couple things about your experience related to the job and keep it on the strength side. I think some people, what I hear and see is some people will go, well, I'm not really that good at that, or I've tried to do that, or yeah, that's not really my strength. No, we don't focus on that. They're interviewing you because you're showing the characteristics. Remember, you passed competence. They're just verifying. So you passed competence. So focus on what you're really good at, your strengths, and be confident in who you are. Like, you're obviously there for a reason. And then it's always cool to throw in something personal and something fun. I was talking to a guy that had done an interview on Zoom, and I was not interviewing him. He was telling me this example. And I am a Big Ten football girl. Like, I went to Ohio State. It's in my blood. I grew up there. I'm a big time Buckeye fan. And so anytime I can connect with somebody around the Buckeyes, I am all in. And so he was telling me the story. He was a Big Ten guy also. He wasn't a Ohio State person, but I think it was Purdue. He was from Indiana, and he was talking about his team playing Purdue, and the guy that he was interviewing with was a Purdue guy. Okay, so he was doing an interview. He did some background checking. He went to LinkedIn and saw that this guy had graduated from Purdue. And what he did on his Zoom call, he just so happened to have a picture. I don't have one in my office to show you, but a picture of the stadium, the stadium, and Indiana was playing Purdue on this picture. And so what he did was he took that picture and he put it in his background for his Zoom call. And Indiana beat Purdue in that picture. It was a specific game that they would know, but it was behind him. And so the guy that was interviewing him on Zoom was the one, just to clarify, he was the one from the other school from Purdue, and they had lost to the team's guy that he was interviewing with, that was on the interview. And so as soon as they got on the Zoom call, the guy sees the picture in the background and he just starts cracking up. He starts laughing. He's like, oh, nice picture, you know? So they're like doing this little battle against each other about football in an interview before anyone ever said a word. How fun is that? It doesn't matter that it wasn't the same team, but it made a connection. That is the thing. How can you make a connection? So I love this part of the tell me about yourself, especially if you go and do the research and you find something about either the company or the people that relates to you. There's a new company in town that is, I'm gonna get this totally wrong, but they're doing, they're taking food trash, and they're doing something where, I can't remember, someone tell me what that word is. Composting, is that the word? And they're composting it and reusing this food for, I don't know, something else. And people are like, it's changing the way for people that are really care about our environment. It's a big deal. So if I am interviewing for this company, you bet I'm going to talk about something that relates to what they do. Love that, Linda, a recruiter, and she made a connection. They're both Zumba instructors and they both live in Atlanta. That is exactly what I'm talking about, because if you can find a connection with the person that's interviewing you, they'll remember you. And they'll be like, you know what? I could work with that person. I like them. Right? So what's the connection? How do you make a connection? And this part of the interview can be part of that, because you can throw in something personal that maybe the company cares about. Okay, so that's the tell me about yourself. And then, and then what are your strengths and weaknesses? And now when you do the playback, you can see those whole examples. I don't want to go through and read them for you right now because I want you to build your own, but you can use those as examples to build out your answers. All right, strengths and weaknesses. Again, this is one that gets asked all the time. And so they're getting to know you. They also want to see if you can communicate and explain why or why not you have a strength in some area. And also, and this is probably the biggest one actually, they want to see if you are self-aware. If you are somebody who is like me, maybe, and not super detail oriented. So I'm administratively strong. It's one of my strengths, administratively strong, but I am not detail oriented. And there is a difference. So I love to use spreadsheets and plan things out and checklists, but the words on my spreadsheet might be spelled wrong because I am moving fast. And so I know that about myself. I can totally talk about it. But when I talk about a weakness, I will talk about it like I am not the best at details. And so what I make sure to do is I have people around me that are checking various different things. For example, when you all got that text this morning that was incorrect with the workshop that was being trained, it said resume writing, I think, instead of interview prep. I didn't have time to get a new email out or a new text out. So what I did do is I sent a text off to our firm that oversees this, and I said, I want a full audit of every single communication going out, every single graphic that is scheduled for the next 3 months. And so they will do that. I'm not going to do it because I know I'm not the detail person, but I'm also, you guys, if you remember, I also was like, oh my gosh, I have that volunteer that is exceptional in this area. So she can go back also and go through everything. And so I know that's not my strength. So I'm supposed to have people that are doing this. I have it in place, but that was missed. So now I have to figure out another way to get something else in place to make sure it's right. So self-awareness. What is your things that you're really good at, but also what are your things that you're maybe not? You want to at least have one of each. So again, I'm not asking you to walk into an interview with a whole bunch of things memorized, but these you should know about yourself. And if you think you don't have strengths or you don't have weaknesses, you're wrong, and you've got to figure those out. I don't call people wrong very often, but in this case, you're wrong. If you don't think you have strengths, you're wrong. If you don't think you have weaknesses, you're wrong. Nobody's perfect, and nobody doesn't have any strengths. We all have them. You can use your DISC assessment that I talked about earlier to get these answers also. So they're going to be incorporated into your DISC. It'll tell you what your strengths are. It'll tell you what, the areas you're not so strong in. And then you can go, yeah, that's true. And then you can talk about how you overcome the weaknesses. So that's what you would want to do. And here again is another sample of the way you can structure this answer. Okay, we have a minute. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I want you to write down on your paper, what's one strength you have? There's a list of some examples on the left-hand side. What is one strength you have? Write it down. And actually, put it in the chat. Let's see. Let's see. What is a strength each of you have? Write that down in the chat so we know that you are working through this with me. Honesty, great. What else? Jennifer, highly empathetic. Detail-oriented, great. Tatiana, do you want to volunteer for our organization? Because I need some help. Ethical, detail, good. Okay, and here's the deal. Detail orientation, I want to say this because this happens all the time. When you are detail-oriented and that is your strength, you need to check your resume 800 times that there's no misspellings. 800. Okay, that's dramatic, but it always happens. We get resumes for people that sit detail orientation, I'm detail oriented, and they'll have misspellings. Like they'll say manger instead of manager. That's one that happens all the time because Word does not catch it. So if you have detail orientation and you have misspellings throughout your resume, that right there might be a reason you're not being contacted. So, okay. So what you want to, I am detail oriented. I learned this through, how did you develop this? How do you know this? And it allowed me to do this at my previous job. So here's an example. As a content creator, I love brainstorming new approaches to reach our consumers, but I am most known for my attention to detail. I care a lot about word choice because I believe that precise language can transform a piece from good to great. Oh, and by the way, I never miss a deadline. So my blogs and articles consistently perform well and reach the top of Google searches. So that is a strength, and that you can spend time on writing out a strength. You still don't have to memorize it, but as long as you know what it is and you can give an example, perfect. That's all you need to do. And same with the weakness, same thing. What's a weakness that you have, and how have you overcome it? Maybe somebody says, I am detail oriented, that's the strength. And at the same time, sometimes I can get frozen and not make a decision because I want to make sure everything is right. I'm so into the details. So sometimes I have to pull myself back and step away and then come back around and look at it again and make sure and take the next step, even though I was nervous to do so. Like that is an example of how you get around your weakness, but it shows that you know yourself. I saw somebody that on here put that they're highly empathetic. It might have been Jennifer. Yes, highly empathetic. My husband is highly empathetic. He is a therapist. He's so good at what he does. He works so well with men and teenagers. Like that's his niche. He is so empathetic. And he had to learn as he was building his business that when the time was up for his client, that he had to stop the conversation because he had another client waiting for him. And so he had to learn, even though he's so empathetic and he wanted to sit with this person in what they were going through, he had to figure out a process to stop, to kind of ramp down the conversation so that he could honor the time for the next person, next client that was scheduled. So, and you know, we've talked about him doing a couple different things. He has now, 15 minutes in between each client to make sure that if it's a real problem, he can sit there with them for a little longer. So, it's what is the weakness and what is it that you have to overcome? So you know that about yourself. So again, it's not memorizing this paragraph here, but it is saying, this is my weakness. I know it. And here's how I deal with it. That says, all right, you have some emotional intelligence. You know what you're talking about. That's why they ask those questions. And then this is the other one, that why should we hire you? It's why should we hire you, or why do you want this job? Those are kind of the questions that get asked at the end. And what the goal is the goal is for them to understand your value, for them to see that you can communicate clearly, and for them to understand your motivators. So for a second, pause, do this. Close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes for a second right now. And I want you to think of a company that you would love to work at. That you would love to work at. Put that in your brain. Put that word, that company, picture it in your brain right now. Just think about it. Okay, got it? In your brain, you have a company right now that you want to work at. All right. Now, what if that company called you in 5 minutes? And you're on this workshop, but you saw it pop up. You're probably going to hang up on the workshop and you're going to answer that call. And you're going to be nervous and you're going to be excited. I hope that's true. Because if it's a company you really want to work at, you're like, yes. And you want to take that call and you're not going to snooze them. You're going to take that call. That is how you should feel about when you're answering this question. You should only be in that interview if you want to work for that company. And you don't have to be doing flips and you don't have to be like that, yeah, maybe your goals might be, I need a paycheck, I need to pay my bills, and I need flexible time so I can pick my kids up from school. Perfect. Why should we hire you, or why do you want to work here? Well, I love what you guys are doing. I love the products that you develop, or I've been watching your social media. I love how you treat your employees, and it's a match for my skill set. And you guys offer the ability for some flexibility because my family is essential and I need to be, take care of my family in the evening. Like whatever it is, you utilize that as your answer. If whatever the company's culture and mission is, it should align in your answer. And again, you should only be applying for companies you want to work for. Because if you're just pushing it out there, pushing it out there, pushing it out there, then when you get into the interview and you don't really know or you don't really care if you work for this company, it's going to be all over you. They're going to know. They're going to know. And people hire people they like, and they work with people they like. You spend a lot of time with the people you work with. A lot. We spend a lot of time with the people we work with. And so people want to hire people they like. They want to like their work days. You all know, we have all gotten that email from that person that you're just like, oh my gosh. You know, like you like open your laptop, look at that email from that person, don't want to open the email, so you shut your laptop and you're like, I need more coffee for this day. Like, you know, everyone wants to work with people they like in some capacity. You don't have to be like outgoing, but like, are they respectful? Can you get along? So that's what you're trying to do in an interview, is make the connection. Okay, so those are some of the main questions. Then you have the behavioral interviewing questions. So these are the ones where we prepped our stories. In fact, let's pause for a second. Jump over to the chat. And when I asked you, what is your dream company, or what's a company you really, really want to work for? Can you drop that in the chat right now? What is a company that hopefully you guys are putting together a list of 10 to 20 companies you want to work for? But what's one? What's one that you really want to work for? Drop that in the chat right now. One company that gets you excited, like, oh, I would love to work for that company. Polk. Awesome. Tatiana, awesome. I don't know if I have any connections at Polk Progressive, but that's a great way, is to go on LinkedIn and see if any of your connections have any contacts at, oh, and you're interviewing with them tomorrow. So perfect timing. Get your stories together today. And hopefully you have done some of the research. If not, go onto their site, do all this research. And so you're ready and excited. Oh, good. I'm so glad you did. Toyota Financial. Perfect, Lizzie. That's great. Progressive, Kimberly. So great. So Lizzie, if Toyota Financial calls you today, I'm sure you're going to pick up and be like, hey, so excited to talk to them. That is how I want you walking in the interview for every single interview. Why interview for a company you don't want to work for? Like, you guys, you are in the driver's seat. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but you are in the driver's seat. And what you have to do is you pursue the companies you want to work for. Because if you are pursuing them, then you're going to find connections. You're going to be excited in the interview. You go after the companies you want to work for. Now, you're also going to likely get companies reaching out to you, or maybe you do apply for a couple that you're like, you don't really know them, or especially if they reach out to you. And then you're going to do the research and find out, do I want to work there? And if the answer is yes, then you become excited about it because you've done the research. Please don't ever go into an interview and be like, oh, I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of going through the process, or I'm not really sure what you guys do. Can you tell me more? Like, that is death. Interview death. Okay? Very rarely would you get an offer after something like that. And so really spend the time getting to know the companies. So often we hear, I am the perfect match for this company, for this job. I've done every single thing. Like, I am the number one candidate. I can't imagine they would ever find somebody more. Or they say I was number 2 in the interview. They told me I was, runner up or whatever. And people aren't getting job offers. It's because of the connection in the interview, most likely. Even if the person that they say that you were the runner-up to, the person they selected, maybe they weren't the highest qualified. Maybe you actually were, but they made the connection, and they can see working with them. that they fit into their team better. That's what you want to do. You want to create the connection. And by giving real examples, but also finding that connection, those are the ways you land in getting offers and offers of companies you want to work for. Okay, so the behavior interviews, again, these are the tell me about a time if, I'm going to give you some more examples, but it is based on past performance. So they want to see, tell me about a time, because they want to know something you've done in the past, because that is an indicator of how you're going to perform in the future. So your past, what you've done in the past, your past performance is an indicator to them of, can you do this in the future? And it's used in all types of interviews. Doesn't matter if it's a panel, informal, team interview, one-on-one, Zoom, it doesn't matter. It's used across the board. And it's also legally defensible. And so a lot of companies will use this and use these and rate you on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 and say, okay, they answered that question. Actually, it's pretty good. It was a 4. Or maybe they say, I could not get an example out of this person. I asked them multiple times to clarify, to don't tell me what you think you would do. Actually, to give you a real guidance on this, let's use the difficult person example. So tell me about a time you had to have a difficult conversation. And I gave you an example earlier of how I could say that based on one of my stories, right? So I was running a fundraising campaign, and the previous person that ran this fundraising campaign didn't agree with how I was raising it. So I called her into a meeting and we kind of went through and compromised. So I gave you that example. Here is what not to say. If they say, tell me about a time you have had a difficult conversation. Well, when I have difficult conversations, I get them in a room, I meet with them, and then, we work it out. And I really try to work really well with people. And so I work it out, and then, it works out fine. Can you see the difference? This is how I would do it is not actually an example of success or even failure, because you can give an example of failure and say, here's what I learned from that. But you see how that answer is vague. No one's going to really believe that you do that. You can quote books. You can say, I've read Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and here's what I would do if my team wasn't working well. The book is this. You can say that all day long, but what you're not saying is what you actually have done. And that's what they want to hear. When have you actually had a team that was a dysfunctional team? What did you do? Yeah, you could have used Patrick Lencioni's theories and process. So tell me about that team that you utilized that in. Don't give me the theory, give me the example. If there's anything you got to write down today, hopefully you are doing all the writing down I'm asking, but answer not in theory, answer in specific examples. That is one of the most important things you can take from the entire day today. When you walk out of an interview giving all theory or this is what I would do, nobody believes you because you haven't given real examples. Give real examples. Okay, I'm going to step off my my box here. I'm going to go into the next section. All right, soapbox. I'm stepping off my soapbox, but we're going to still be talking about behavioral interviewing. So here are just some example questions. Just some examples. You are not going to memorize any of this. You don't need to memorize any of this. You don't need to even write any of this down. I mean, it's good to see, hey, these are the type of questions that would be asking, but you don't need to memorize it, because when someone asks you a question like the 4th one on here, give me an example of a time when you had to deal with strict deadlines or time demands. If someone asks you that, you're going to look at your paper that has your 10 stories jotted down. Remember your 10 that you're going to write. And you're going to just quickly glance down and you're like, let me use the fundraiser one. I wouldn't use multiple examples over and over again, but for example, the fundraiser one I wrote down earlier, I had a tight deadline. We had 3 months to plan this and the event was on this day. So I had to back it up, right? So I looked at the date we were going to launch. Maybe you're launching a program, a software implementation, maybe you're changing a process for your team, whatever the deadline is, and then you have to back it up and talk about that. Talk about how you hit the deadline, how you got people to buy into that, deadline, and how did you do it? You don't have to memorize that question. When they ask it, all you got to do is look down at your answers and find one that fits. How about describe a great success you had with turning a service failure around? So maybe you haven't been in the service industry, but if you're in a manufacturing plant, for example, and you're doing products, that's still a process. That's still a service. Let's say the manufacturing, maybe the line went down. What did you have to do to turn that around? Maybe that's one of your examples. There is probably on your list an example of something that didn't go well and you had to fix it and you had to turn it around. What is an example? That's what I'm telling you to do. You don't need to memorize. You just need to get your stories down. You got to get those written out. So again, just as a recap of this process, the STAR process is create the story. What was the situation? Screenshot this if you'd like. What was the situation? How were you involved? What happened? The task is explain what was involved in the task. What was the story or the action? Again, sometimes these two go together. The action. What steps did you take? And how did you complete those steps? And then the results. What did you do? What did you learn about yourself? So again, this is how you answer behavioral interview questions. We talked about the difficult conversations. Okay, so I'm just going to look over here to see if there are any questions. I'm going to move on into being at the interview and some tips and tricks about the interview. But if there are any questions about behavioral interviewing, about STAR or golden moments, go ahead and drop them in the chat now. So I have a second while I'm looking over here. And I want to make sure that you really all understand, and I know I've said it over and over, how essential it is to get your stories down. 10 stories. Spend the time to write them out before you ever interview. Write them out. And then when you go to the interview, you're going to bring a notepad that has 1 through 10, at least, of your stories. Just a one-liner to remember that. PAR. Jessica, the other one is PAR. I'll write it down here. P-A-R. Whoops. And that is problem, action, result. If any of you, I don't go into ChatGPT today or AI tools, but if you are using AI tools, utilize ChatGPT or Copilot in Microsoft, and you can say, you can drop your resume in there and you can ask it to create some PAR statements for you. If you need some help getting going or some STAR statements, it will know what that means. And it will come up. And actually, it's also another really great way to create your accomplishment statements for your resume. It will give you some ideas. Okay. So that is, that PAR is a really, really great way to, same as STAR and same as the golden moments. Okay. I'll bring that up in just a minute, Bukola, around salary. Okay. So at the interview, here's what I want you to think about. What do I bring? How do I dress? What do I bring? So you want to dress to impress. And so in this, I always caution people to be a little careful though. You want to dress to impress, but if you're going to interview for a manufacturing facility or a company that is super casual, then you don't want to be wearing a tux, right? That's a little dramatic, but you don't want to be wearing a three-piece suit. You want to walk into the interview, I always say, one step above what they normally dress like. So if they are khakis and a collared shirt, then you want to be wearing nice pants and a button-up shirt. Something just like one step above. Okay? You want to be relatable, like they're, okay, we can work with them. If they're all in jeans interviewing you and you're in a three-piece suit, it's going to be like, oh, I don't think that guy can fit in this culture. Okay? So dress one step above. Okay, Jessica, that's great, but how do I know how they dress? How do I know? And so all the ways we talked about, the website, social media, you can see what their socials look like. You can watch their YouTube videos to see what their employees look like during the day. You can, if you want, go show up in their parking lot and see what people look like coming out. All right? Stalker-ish. No, I'm kidding. You can do that. You can show up and see what they're wearing so you know what to wear in your interview. But one step above, and same with the Zoom interviews, the virtual, dress nice in the virtual interviews. Okay. Now, what do I need to bring? You need to bring a resume, multiple copies, actually, a cover letter, if you did one. If you did one and you applied with a cover letter, bring it. So basically, you want to bring a copy of anything you applied with. You want to make sure to have a copy there. Then you also want to bring your references and have them available. References are important because if they ask, you want to give them right there. They're not always going to ask, and they may ask later. But if they ask you for them, you want to be able to give them to them. So you can either bring them in hard copy or just have them available, on your phone or something where you can forward them. But with references, you want to make sure that whoever you're putting down on references, that they know that they've been asked to be one of your references. So often we've called references and the person that we've called didn't know that they were one of their references, would not have referred them if asked, and had no idea what job this was for. And so when you're creating references, it's important that you create a base list of references. Maybe I always say 2 colleagues, which are peers, which are people same level, 2 supervisors, people you've worked for, 2 subordinates, which is like people that have worked for you, if you have them, if you've been a leader, and then 2 personal. So 6 minimum and at least 8 if you've been a leader, if you've been a manager. So you create that list. You can do that right now. Doesn't even matter who you're applying for. You create that list and you talk to each of them and say, hey, I'd like to put you on your reference list. Is that okay? And you say, yeah, sure. Or you're like, I'm not really comfortable, or I'm too busy right now to be taking those calls. You listen to what they say. If they say, oh, I'm not really sure, take them off. Do not put anyone who's questionable on your list. So create your references. And then if a company asks for your references, you go back to the people. Maybe they ask for 4 references. You pull the 4 best references from your list for that company. And then you tell those references, hey, I gave your name to this company and here's the job. Because then when they call for the references, they're going to know already. They're already going to know. So officially, a company, when they call a company to verify your employment, they can verify your employment. They can't ask a lot of questions legally. But with your references can talk and talk and talk and talk. So they'll tell all about you. Excuse me, especially if it's somebody that you put on the recommendation list. So make sure that they like you. I have had managers say, I don't know why they put me on it, and I prefer not to say anything. And by them not saying anything, that actually says a lot. We're like, oh, okay, we dodged a bullet there. Okay, so bring in your references, bring in your interview notes. You know what the interview notes are, right? The 10 stories. The 10 stories are the interview notes. So bring in your 10 stories, just one line that will help you recall what that story is about. Because the goal is when you look down at your list, you're going to be like, you might be nervous. You know, your whole head, everything might just completely go blank. Your goal is to use that just to trigger your memory, just to be like, oh, okay, the fundraising event. Let me talk about that. And then you can share about the fundraising event. So bring your notes, bring a pen and a notepad so you can take notes. One of my favorite tips about interviewing, you guys, is when they're asking a question, when someone's asking me a question, I even do this like in podcast, or if someone's interviewing me for the news or anything, when they're talking and asking, I'm writing that question down. Because what you need to do is make sure you answer it. So sometimes you'll be answering a question and I'll go, let's say I'll use the fundraiser as an example because it's on my list. I'll start talking about the fundraiser and I'll get really excited and say all the great things we did. And then I'll be like, what did they ask me? I got to land this plane, but I don't know what they asked me. I can't remember. So if I wrote it down, if like they said, tell me about a time you had a difficult conversation, I just take difficult conversation and I write that down on my notepad. And then as I'm telling the story, I make sure to include that difficult conversation that I had. So pen and paper, pen and notepad. I spelled notepad wrong. Do you know how many times I've taught this workshop and I have not had anyone tell me that yet? I just caught it. So I told you guys, details, not my thing. So bring your pen and notepad, and then turn off your cell phone. Completely off, or leave it in the car. That's one of the best recommendations I've heard, is don't even bring it in. Because here's the thing, with your phone, if a notification comes on, if it buzzes, if it lights up, just the way we're wired, our eyes look over at it, and we might think, was that our daughter? Was that, do my kids need something? Don't bring it in. The only exception, I wouldn't say the only exception. The exception to that is if you really do have an urgent situation that may be possible, that may be happening, then you disclose that and you say, hey, my daughter has been sick today and I need my cell phone on in case the school calls and I have to leave. Tell them that ahead of time. Otherwise, don't even bring it in. All right, that is before the interview, how to get ready. Now during, you want to, a lot of the time today, we've talked about the connection, right? That's the number one thing you're there for, is to make the connection. They essentially know that you're qualified, right? You've been through the competence part. They want to know that you're making a connection and that they like you. So first impressions matter. First impressions matter. I don't care if you're not the kind of person that smiles, because that's not your thing. You can smile for an interview. You can say hello. You can be kind. Everybody can do that. Arrive a few minutes early and make sure you engage with everyone you come in contact with. Maybe you have somebody that's at the front desk, and you're saying, hey, I'm here for an interview. Be kind to that person. Engage with them. If somebody holds the door open for you, engage with them. If there's somebody that gets on a Zoom call and you have no idea who they are and why they're there, engage with them. It doesn't matter. Say, hey, thanks for hosting the Zoom call today. Just have a brief conversation. And then make sure all of your answers are based on facts, not theory and what you would do, but what you've actually done. And we've spent a lot of time on that today. So when you walk in, the handshake, looking them in the eyes, making sure you have that smile, this is all part of that first impression. And the other thing with the first impression is making sure that, I say mirror their initial response, which doesn't make sense a lot of times. But what I mean by that is, if you walk into a room for an interview And maybe you're supposed to interview with 6 people. Maybe there's 2 people there. And the 2 people that are there are asking you some questions about how was your drive? Man, isn't the weather great today? Like, what do you love about Arizona? Small talk essentially. Then engage in that. Have it back. Don't just answer the question and sit there. Like, you're trying to make a connection. So, oh my gosh, the weather is awesome. I love Arizona. I know it's about to get super hot, so I'm really enjoying these days. What do you like to do in Arizona? Make that small talk if they are making small talk with you. And then on the flip side of that, if you walk into an interview or a Zoom call and they go, hey, we're so glad you're here. We are interviewing you for this job, and here's what that job's about. And they go right into it. And they go, kind of give us an overview of yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Do not try to pull back the interview and go into small talk, because that will be annoying to them. So that's what I mean. If they're wanting to engage a little bit, getting to know you on the front end, do that. Spend some time doing that, even if that's not your gift. I am not a small talk person. I'm just not. It's not my thing. But I have learned how to just be curious about people, get to know people, ask questions. That's how I engage with small talk. But when I interview, I go right into it. I have interviews stacked back to back to back to back every 30 minutes. When I'm doing interviews for jobs, I'm back to back to back. I don't have time for the small talk. I go right into it. I'm validating, are you competent and could you potentially be a good fit? That's what I'm evaluating. And then when we move on to the actual hiring team, that's when the hiring team is going to be more like, hey, and they want to be able to make sure they get along with you well. So that's what mirroring the response means. And then here are some questions you can ask that are good questions. But before you even think about bringing in a list of 5 questions, what I want you to do is more important than that is when you're out there looking at their website, when you're out there looking at social media and doing research on the company, what are some questions you have? What are some things you've learned? If they really care about the environment, like what got you guys into this? I love that you care about this because, man, it's a passion of mine. How did you guys get started, or what's the history there? I didn't see that on your website, but man, I love it. Or I see that you guys every Christmas adopt a group home of boys, and you provide all the Christmas presents. How did you get into that? That is so cool. That's what I'm talking about. You connect. This is about connection, especially the first interview, of course, but the first interview with like the hiring managers, the team you're going to be working with. It's important for the recruiter. Like, you don't want to dismiss that. If it's a screening call, you do not want to dismiss that because they want to like you. They want to know that you can work with this team. But the whole like really wanting to work there has to be in the manager interview. So ask those questions. Ask about their products or what they're doing or the impact they're making. So that comes through your research. But then these are decent questions to ask. And you don't have to wait to the end to ask them. You can ask them throughout the interview. And don't feel like you have to go in and ask 5 questions. You don't. Maybe you ask 1 or 2. Maybe what do you really want to know that you don't know about the company yet? That's what you ask, because then it shows you really want to work there. You didn't just create a list of 5 questions and now I have to ask you. That's so annoying to a hiring manager, to a recruiter. It's like, oh, do you have any questions for me? Oh yeah, wait, I have a list of 10 questions. And you know that those 10 questions were pulled off the internet. They don't really care. Like, when you want to work at a company, you probably have some questions that you have to ask about the company. Those are the questions you want to ask. But here's what not to ask. You do not want to ask about salary and benefits, especially, I would say, the screening call, if there is a screening call, and the first interview. The whole goal of that first interview and second interview, the first like hiring manager interview, is to make a connection. When you end the interview with salary and benefits question, it just leaves a bad taste. Hopefully, and we see this happening more and more, where a lot of states are requiring the salary ranges to be put on the job description. Man, I just hope that happens because across the nation, because it helps us vet if we should apply for these jobs or not. Sometimes you can be called a program manager or a program director and they want to pay you like $30,000 and you're like, what? So I get the frustration. I get it. But I'm here to tell you the first 1 or 2 interviews is not the place. You are trying to build a connection. And if they ask you, hey, what are your salary requirements? Maybe you do have a range in mind and you are comfortable sharing that. And I'm okay. I'm not somebody that's going to say, don't answer that question. But I am going to say, if you're uncomfortable and you don't know, you don't have to answer it. You can say, well, I was looking out on, or I know what I've been paid in the past, and I was kind of looking at the area and the compensation studies that have been done. And my salary range fits right in the requirements of what the expectations are for this job. In fact, I had a lady yesterday. She said she had a great answer. And she's a communications director. And I asked her, she's not from my area of town or state. She lives in the East Coast. And I had said to her, as I was interviewing for this job, salaries on the East Coast are often way different than they are in the Southwest. And this was specifically for a church. And so the ministry area salaries are a lot less. And she said, absolutely, I totally understand that. You don't go into ministry for the money. You don't. She said, but my goal is to be able to pay my salary, have a living wage, pay my bills, and continue to be able to do some of the side work that I do. She's a freelancer also. And she said, I wouldn't want that to be in the way. And I'm like, that is a great answer. And she didn't have to answer the question, but she was also setting her boundaries. I'm not going to work for nothing. I'm not going to work an 80-hour week for nothing. So that's how you can do it. Do your research so you know, because if they do keep pushing on you, then you can say that I saw the range was this, and my salary would fit in that range. I probably lean a little bit more. I have a lot more experience, so I probably lean on the higher end of that. But you do not have to give an actual number. Other things not to ask. Don't ask a question that has already been answered. And what I mean by that, let me go back up, is this was my list of questions I said are good questions to ask. Sometimes companies will start by saying, this is the job and this is the type of person we're looking for that has these skills. So they're answering that second question. What are the top skills you're looking for? At the end of the interview, do not ask, what are the top skills you're looking for, even though it's on your paper to ask, because they already answered it. And they'll be like, were they even listening? Or they say, so this is the process. You would have these interviews. If it all works out, we'll provide an offer letter. And then your onboarding would be a week of training, and you would be meeting with your supervisor and walk you through it. Don't ask. Even though it's on your list, don't ask, what does onboarding look like? They already answered it. So a lot of people do that because they're nervous and you're like, these are my questions to ask. I got to ask them. Don't. Keep engaged in this interview and make sure if they ask you or they answer a question, you can just mark it off your page. Don't ask it. So that's what I mean by that. And then anything that's high pressure, especially in these first couple interviews when you're trying to make the connection, things like there's a big layoff coming that I know about. And I know that because I'm in the workforce, right? And maybe you have some insider information because because of what you do. I would never go into an interview and say, so I heard you guys are laying off 800 people. Is that true? Like, that's not the time or place to do it. Now, you can do it other ways. You can do research. You can go when you get the offer, maybe that's the time you're like, hey, I heard this is happening. I just want to make sure that this is the right time I really want to work here, but I also don't want to be laid off in 6 months. So can we talk about that? Anything that's high pressure or negative business environment questions, those are off the table. And then, of course, what is this job? Tell me about this company. Tell me about this job. No, those are no's. And lastly is be excited to be there. Be excited to be there. Hopefully, again, you're only going to interviews for companies you want to work for. And I used to tell people years ago, what if somebody reaches out for an interview and asks me to interview and I don't really want the job? I used to say, well, you could go for practice and you could go to learn more about yourself. But what I've come to realize over the years of doing this work, the last 15 years, is it's worse off. Like, for most people, you go to an interview and you don't really want to be there. It's really hard to interview well. It's really hard to show enthusiasm. It's really hard to come across as excited about the company. So you're actually doing yourself a disservice. For example, what if you know that you must at least work from home 2 days a week? You know that for your family. You know that you have to work for 2 days a week. They're flexible, but you do need to work hybrid or remote 2 days a week. And then you're going into this company that offered you an interview, but you know there's no way you could ever work from home, that it's 100% in office. You're going to go and you're going to be frustrated and you're going to think, maybe I can talk them out of it. No, don't do that to yourself. I've had people do that were like, hey, I can travel about 20% of the time. And then they go for interviews where travel is like 70, 80% of time. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, well, the money is really good. And I could adjust. And I'm like, could you adjust 70 to 80%? I don't want to. I'll just talk to them and maybe they'll be able to come up with something. No, don't put yourself and your family in that situation to have to decide, do I choose my career or my family? No, make that choice ahead of time. And don't go on that interview. Focus your energy and effort on companies you do want to work for. Does that make sense? Companies you do want to work for. So you want to be excited about it. Show that. It's okay to be happy that you're in the interview. Be confident. And here, those 2 words, right? They're like, anybody can say be confident. But here's the thing. You wrote down 10 stories. You are the only one that knows the details of these 10 stories. What if you mess up a story? Who cares? No one's going to know. No one's going to know. So if I am talking about this fundraising thing and I say we raised $62,000 and actually if you go look at the data, it was $61,000. Who cares? It's a non-issue. Maybe I get somebody's name wrong. Maybe I didn't make quite as many phone calls as I said in the interview. Who cares? Those details, not as important. The important part is showing that you can do something. Now, don't lie. That's not what I'm saying. But like the details, if you don't get every single detail right, it's okay. It's your story. Tell the story. Tell the story like you're having a conversation. So that's how you can be confident. You're like, no one knows themselves, or no one knows me as good as I know me. So I'm going to be able to portray that. And then make sure you are engaged from a body language perspective and really leaning in and talking to people. And, your arms aren't crossed and you don't look mad, right? Like we don't want to do that. And then just relax and breathe. And I say, when you are waiting for the interview and you're in the lobby or wherever, maybe it's in the car 10 minutes before the interview, you can just put everything down and breathe. Just breathe. Spend a few minutes calming yourself down, relaxing your brain, and breathing. Because then you will walk into the interview relaxed. Interviews get us all like, nervous. You don't want to come in that way. You want to come in calm. You know you better than anyone else. You know you better than anyone else. Okay, after the interview, here are a couple things we're going to do. We're going to follow up. We're going to follow up with everybody that you interviewed with. And when you're in the interview, if you did not get a name, then ask it before you leave. Hey, I'm sorry, I missed your name. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Get the name. If you get email, that's great. But you must at least get their name, because then when you go into LinkedIn, you can put their name in and their company, and they'll most likely pop up. Not everybody's on LinkedIn, but a lot of people are. So you can connect with them that way. And that is such a great way to connect and write a little note about a reminder of who you are, maybe whatever that connection point was. To bring it back to football, maybe I would say things like, if they're Big Ten people, I would say go Bucks as a joke, right? Like whatever that connection point is. Atlanta, Zumba, maybe in a follow-up email, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the person that put Zumba in Atlanta. Maybe you put a link to your favorite Zumba workout or something, like something fun. So there's that connection reminder there. And it's like, thank you so much for the interview. I'm excited about this and bringing my strength of this, whatever it is, to your organization. And FYI, here's a link to my favorite Zumba workout. Something that reiterates your interest, it reiterates your qualifications, and then it's also the connection point. All right, so email is absolutely appropriate, but if you can do it on LinkedIn, that is the best because your information is right there for them. Dawn, in addition to LinkedIn, are there other websites we can use like Dawn, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the main professional location for anyone that is a recruiter or hiring manager. It is the place and it's expected. And so there may be other platforms and other places, but there's nothing like LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the place. And then analyzing the interview, when you're done, step back and go, okay, what did I do? Did I basically perform well? Did I answer the questions? What stumped me? What wasn't I prepared for? So maybe they asked a behavioral question and you're like, oh my gosh, that one I couldn't answer with my list. Maybe you need to come up with another one. But were you prepared? Did you bring your notes in? So really think through that. And then did you engage and build rapport? Did you find the connection? If you get nothing out of today, you guys, please get connection. Connection trumps everything else. You build the connection and they will remember you. They will remember you. You build the connection because you were likable. So we walked through the hiring process, what it looks like, and the life cycle of an interview. We talked about how do you research and prepare for interviews. And we also spent a lot of time working through crafting our narrative and building out your responses. And then we capped at the end with what you do at the interview and how you follow up. So what I want you to do now is stop for a second, and I want you to think through what all we talked about today. There was a lot of content in here around interviewing. And again, we're going to send you the link so you can watch back this webinar and you can fast forward it and pause it, whatever you need. But I want you to think through all the stuff we talked about today so far. And I want you to write down one thing that you can do this week to prepare to be ready for an interview. Think through. What's one thing you can do? Well, we're on Thursday, right? So I would say by next Friday. By next Friday, which is like March 6th or 7th, what is one thing you can do by next Friday that will help you be prepared when you get that interview call. And write it in the chat. Myra, you were ahead of me. I was going to say, write it in the chat. Yes, create your stories. That's so good. The par and the star statements, so good. Lily said, use AI to create your par statements. Such a good idea. And I'm going to drop in a couple links. Well, I'm going to just drop in my favorite link to an AI tool. So ChatGPT is the one I use predominantly. There's a ton out there, but this one is a great one to use. And so use the ChatGPT function and go in there, and literally it starts with, it says, what can I help you with? And you write something in that section. AI says, what can I help you with? And you say, I need to write out 10 stories about my experience. 10 par statements about my experience. And you can copy and paste your resume right into the tool if you want. So it's a great one. Okay, Golden Moments companies. All right, so if you email me by next Friday with 2 stories, you can do all 10 if you want, but at least 2 stories, I will shout you out on LinkedIn. I have over 20,000 connections on LinkedIn, and the vast majority of them are recruiters and hiring managers. So, and a lot of people who have been in career transition too, but a lot of hiring managers, recruiters. So if you do that, at least 2 of your stories, your successes, your par statements, connect with me on LinkedIn and then send me 2. I will shout you out. Now, the last couple times I've done this, I've gotten bombarded. And so it takes me a little bit of time to work through everybody, but I will shout you out because I don't do them all in one day. I spread them out. So I'd love to help you out that way. Dawn, it has to be in LinkedIn. I'm not accepting, I mean, you can email me, but I'm not shouting out in email. I'm shouting out in LinkedIn because I tag you when I shout you out. And then people can go right to your profile. So good job, you guys. That all looks good. I want to talk about what we have coming up. So Arizona at Work, Pinal County is the organization that is sponsoring these workshops. Yes, thank you, Arizona at Work, Pinal County. I know sometimes we have people on the call that are from Pinal County, so if you are on the line, please drop in hello and say you're here. Sometimes they are here, sometimes they're not. But if you are in Arizona, and if you are specifically in Pinal County, get this QR code right here or visit them at pinal.gov/career services. They have a lot of options and support for you. You can get right into their database and their system for jobs that are available. Career exploration, actually anybody can do this, but specifically for this funding is for the Pinal County residents, and they can provide additional support services. So it's a great organization. If you are not in Arizona or in Pinal County, Arizona at Work is the whole state. You can go to any Arizona at Work website and get support services. If you are outside of Arizona, type this in Google. I'm going to put it in the chat. WIOA and then your state. WIOA and then your state. And what that is, WIOA is Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. It's a federal law that each state gets a certain amount of funding every year that waterfalls down to the states to provide job services. And so your state has something. Every state has something. It doesn't mean that every state is going to be able to support you in exactly your place, because sometimes some of the states provide support first to veterans and then support to people with disabilities. And so there's sometimes they offer different groups first, but almost all of them have some type of support services. And this is an example of one of those support services. So you can put it on here, but what I want you to do is do WIOA California, and I want you to do it on Google, because then you'll see what the support services are. Okay, so a little bit about Career Connectors, and then I'm going to open it up for Q&A for the last 15 minutes or so. Career Connectors is a nonprofit organization. We are all about helping you build strong careers, and we do it through providing resources and empowering you with resources and hope, so that you can find those careers that you want. Here are some of our virtual workshops coming up. We do resume writing, job search essentials, interview prep, and salary negotiation are some of the ones we have coming up for the next couple months. And if you want to watch back any that we've done previously, we kicked this specific grant off last July. All of those previous events are on our website and in our archive. And so the salary negotiation one that was done last month is out there right now. In branding and networking is also out there. We're not doing another one of those. We don't have another one of those scheduled anyway, but you can watch it back. And so in your email, you'll get a link for all of those workshops. And then our big Career Connectors events, every month, we do a virtual event that is something current in the job search. So on Thursday, a week from today, we have our resume panel. It's one of our most sought after events. And we bring 3 professional certified resume writers into our event. And then I interview them, basically. I ask about resumes. Many people have submitted questions about resumes. We use that. And so that will be the main topic. And then after we do some resources and information, we will break out and you will have the ability to speak with different coaches, resume writers, of course, the people that are speaking, career coaches, financial coaches, LinkedIn coaches, and more. And so we have breakout rooms where you can jump into those breakout rooms. And all of these resources are at no cost. And so there's our March, April, and May events. I know there's a lot of women speakers for the next 3 months, but I promise these are great for men too. The next 3 months after that, it's a lot of men. So I don't know how that worked this year. And then that is my QR code. If you want my information on LinkedIn, of course, please connect with me on LinkedIn. And then I would love to connect on Instagram. I do a lot of posts on Instagram about job search and where the jobs are and workforce kind of stuff. And so that is that information. And thank you all for being here. So I am going to move over to I'm going to stop sharing and allow the chat or allow you guys to unmute. If you have a question, you are free to unmute yourself now, and you can ask your question. Let's see. Right, there we go. You can ask your question and or you can write it in the chat and I'd be happy to answer that. Thank you all for being here. Again, you will get an email that has a recap link directly to the webinar for today, and it also has a whole bunch of resources for you. So if you want to, you may unmute.